A very good friend of mine is going back to school to pursue her master's degree. She is also an avid cyclist. So when her husband asked me to build her a stand that she could rest her laptop, tablet, or books on so that she could study and get some indoor cycling time in, I gladly accepted the opportunity. We came up with a design in SketchUp that we thought looked stylish and functional and decided that poplar would be the perfect wood for the build. I picked up some 4 6/4 boards from my good friends at the Woodyard in Concord, Georgia that would be perfect for this. While they aren't a sponsor, I'd like to say thank you to all the guys at the Woodyard for always having great materials to work with. I'll leave a link for them down in the video description below. To get started, I wanted to get the shelf that will hold the books or devices cut and glued up so that it has time to dry while I work on the base and the stand. The shelf is made from our 4/4 poplar. I get it cut down to the rough dimensions of the miter saw and then clean up the edges on the table saw. A little bit of glue, a few clamps, shelf is ready to be set off to the side for a bit until I'm ready for it. The upright for the stand is going to be made out of the 6/4 poplar. After cutting it to rough length with the miter saw, I ran it through the table saw to bring it to final width. The width on the upright isn't necessarily a critical dimension for the end product, but it is important for the next step, which is laying out the tenon that will connect it to the base, which I'm laying out here. I struggled with how I was going to cut out the tenon, but ended up settling on using a combination of the bandsaw and the table saw. The bandsaw cut was fairly straightforward. The only part that I had issues with was supporting the end through the cut. This piece is about 5 feet long, so there was quite a bit hanging off of the tabletop. The table saw cut, on the other hand, was a bit more complex. Because this tenon is at an angle to the upright, it meant that I would have to get creative with my setup. I made a quick tenon jig for my rip fence, got it clamped to the right angle, and got the rest of the tenon cut with no issues. Of course, these cuts were a bit rough, but I was able to clean them up with my chisels. Now, my chisels are old and super dull. Fear not, though. I have a video in the works to get them both looking and actually being sharp. When I designed the base, I wanted it to look fast. It's a bike after all. At the same time, it needed to nest the front bike tire in as close as possible without interfering with the handlebars or the pedals when the bike is mounted to the stationary bike rack. I played around with a few different concepts, but settled on a V-shape. After cutting the pieces to length on the miter saw, I ran them through the planer to give them a slightly lower profile. I absolutely love this Grizzly planer. Thank you, Anne, for donating it to the channel. I get a ton of use out of it. The only thing that it needs is chip collection. My current shop vac system just can't handle the amount of chips that this thing can actually make. Next up was cutting the angles for the V. For some reason, I struggled with this badly. First, my miter saw didn't have enough depth to make the cut, so I decided to use my DIY saw guides and my circular saw. That worked well enough, but I laid it out at the wrong angle. So then I decided to use a sled on the table saw. I laid out some template blocks on a piece of MDF and double-sided tape to hold the pieces down. I should have just done this in the first place, but live and learn, I suppose. Now it's time to lay out the mortise that will hold the tenon that we cut into the upright. The way that the base is designed, each of the two base pieces will have half of the mortise. I had a concern that this might not be strong enough, so what I decided on was to make a through mortise and add through dowels into those mortises that would extend from one base through the tenon and into the other base piece. So let's go ahead and get that laid out. To get the mortise cut out, it's back over to the bandsaw. I'll cut these close to the line but not to full depth, and then once again we'll clean them out with the chisels. Drilling in the holes for the dowels is next. I'm using my Harbor Freight drill guide. It isn't the greatest, but it did get the job done. In the future, I may get the Milescraft or Rockler version, but for now, this works well enough. This may or may not surprise you all, but this is the most complex build I've ever attempted. That includes the time that I built a skateboard launch ramp when I was a teenager. That being the case, I was a little bit intimidated by this glue up. Getting those dowels through the upright tenons and into the opposing bases scared me just a bit. But in the end, I got it. And it wasn't as challenging as I thought it would be. It just goes to show that if you put your mind to something, you can accomplish anything. Thanks, George McFly.
Like I've always told you, you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Now that the base is together, it's time to revisit the shelf. It's going to have a trapezoidal shape, so we need to get that laid out, cut out, and then soften the edges, get it sanded, and we'll also add a piece of unnecessary walnut just to give it that little extra something. I also soften all the edges on the base as well as the upright and get it sanded to 180 in prep for finish. The shelf is going to get mounted to the upright using a couple of stainless screws. Now I did consider using dowels for this, but opted for the screws just in case my friend decides later on that they want to go with a slightly larger shelf. This makes it easy to take the existing shelf off and change it out with a new one. Now, this may be a little bit controversial, but for the finish, I'm just using Rattle-Can's spray-on satin polyurethane. I don't have any really good means of spraying on a finish on a large scale as of yet. I opted for the Rattle-Cans because of availability and price, ultimately. In the future, I want to set up a booth area for finishing and utilize an HVLP sprayer. Now I have the sprayer already and I have a few ideas on the spray booth, so stay tuned for that project in the future. I added my brand to the bottom of the shelf. I added some button feet to the bottom of the base to help with leveling on uneven floors, and this project was complete. I had a lot of fun with this build. It was a nice challenge and I learned a few new techniques. I think the stand looks great and my friend is getting a lot of use out of it. If you like this video, then be sure to hit the like button, and also share it with anyone that you think might enjoy it. If you feel that I've earned it, then please subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any future videos. If you'd like to help support the channel, then please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching.